On a freezing January afternoon in 1982, a Boeing 737 sat on a runway in Washington, D.C., its wings layered with invisible danger. Passengers laughed, talked, and settled into their seats, never realizing that in just minutes, their aircraft would lift into the sky only to fall straight toward a bridge packed with cars below. This is the story of Air Florida Flight 90, the disaster that exposed deadly mistakes, silent warnings, and the brutal power of winter itself. January 13, 1982, Washington National Airport. The temperature well below freezing. The city buried under one of the heaviest snowstorms in years. Delayed flights clogged the airport, de-icing trucks struggled to keep up, and winter began to stack the odds against every aircraft on the ground. Inside the cockpit of Flight 90, Captain Larry Wheaton and First Officer Roger Pettit prepared their Boeing 737-200 for takeoff. They were running late, frustrated, and watching snow pile on their aircraft faster than ground crews could remove it. When ground de-icing fluid was sprayed, it only bought minutes of safety. But Flight 90 sat, waiting. Snow continued to fall, ice continued to form, and the crew, concerned about the delay, made a critical and fatal decision. They attempted to de-ice the aircraft using the hot exhaust of the plane in front of them. It didn't work. Instead, it melted the snow, which then refroze into a hard, clear layer of ice on the wings and sensors, ice the crew could barely see and wouldn't fully understand. As the aircraft taxied into position, more warnings appeared. The engines weren't producing normal power. The thrust readings looked wrong. Ice inside the engine sensors corrupted the numbers. First Officer Pettit noticed. He said the engines didn't feel right. He said the readings weren't normal. But each time the captain brushed it away. They were late, they were tired, and they wanted to get airborne. The aircraft lined up on runway 36. Power increased. The Boeing 737 shook in the cold wind, but the engines were not giving the thrust they should. Already, Flight 90 was fighting physics with broken weapons. The plane accelerated, slowly, too slowly, and then the cockpit heard the worst sound possible just before liftoff. The stall warning, a loud, angry horn, a final attempt from the aircraft to save itself. The Boeing lifted off the runway, but it did not climb. It dragged, struggling to gain altitude. Ice on the wings destroyed lift. Faulty sensor readings fooled the pilots, and the plane entered a shallow, doomed arc over the Potomac River. Passengers saw the water beneath them. Witnesses on the ground stared in horror as the plane's tail scraped the surface. But the worst was seconds away. At 4:01 p.m., Air Florida Flight 90 slammed into the 14th Street Bridge, tearing through traffic and crushing vehicles caught in the evening rush. The force ripped the aircraft apart. Debris rained into the frozen Potomac. Cars were thrown like toys. And then, silence. A heavy, impossible silence over the snowstorm. Of the 79 people on board, only a handful survived the initial impact. They found themselves trapped in freezing water, surrounded by wreckage, barely able to keep their heads up as ice floes drifted around them. Their lifeline would come not from rescue boats, not from nearby cars, but from the sky. A U.S. Park Police helicopter hovered just inches above the river, its rotors blasting snow and ice in all directions. The crew lowered lines, fighting the storm, risking their own lives. One man in the water kept passing the rescue rope to others, refusing to save himself first. His name was Arlen D. Williams, Jr. He saved several people, But when the helicopter returned for him, he was gone. The Potomac claimed him, but his courage remains one of the most powerful acts of heroism in aviation history. A man who chose others again and again until he could no longer hold on. The bridge he died beneath now carries his name. Investigators quickly uncovered the tragic chain of errors: improper de-icing, attempting to use another aircraft's exhaust to melt snow, failure to activate the 737's engine anti-ice system, misread engine instruments, ignoring stall warnings. Each step alone was dangerous. Together, they guaranteed disaster. Air Florida Flight 90 was not just a crash. It was a moment where winter, human error, and the smallest decisions combined into catastrophe. But within that tragedy rose unforgettable acts of bravery. The rescuers who risked everything, and the passenger who gave everything. Today, the story of Flight 90 stands as a reminder. In aviation, safety is built on humility, discipline, and respect for nature. And in humanity, heroism can emerge from the coldest, darkest moments. This was Air Florida Flight 90, the day a Boeing 737 fell from the sky and a nation witnessed courage in the freezing Potomac.